Attention Caribbean authors and creators. Are you looking to elevate your literary journey? This is Kevin George, your host and presenter from TLC Tropical Literature Creatives, and I'm thrilled to share an exciting opportunity with you. Introducing our bespoke promotional services designed exclusively for authors of Caribbean heritage. Whether you're a seasoned professional or a rising star, we're here to amplify your voice. From getting the word out about your book launch, your self-publishing services, or workshops, to sharing services that you offer to fellow authors and creatives. Visit our website or reach out to us today to explore how we can tailor our expertise to showcase your literary brilliance. Let's unlock the next chapter of success together. Greetings, listenership. Welcome to TLC Tropical Literature Creatives, the podcast where we interview authors of Caribbean heritage about themselves and about their literary works. Today we have with us Katrina Khan Roberts, environmentalist and all-around mermaid, here with us to tell us about her book, Metrina, the Marine-Minded Mermaid. Katrina, welcome to Tropical Literature Creatives.
Thank you so very much for having me. I'm very excited to talk more about my writing specifically today.
Okay, great. And I know that is important because from what I understand, you wear a number of hats. You've been involved in a number of activities. But, we're going to keep it simple today, strictly about the books, strictly about the books.
Thank you. So, yes, I'm very excited. Thank you so much. I think that this is a fantastic platform, especially for our underrepresented Caribbean writers. So, thank you very much for your work as well.
Okay, well, that's great to hear. And I'm really glad that it is really benefiting the authors to bring attention to their work and also to persons who are curious as to what the Caribbean has to offer. The main book that I was going to talk to you about is Metrina, the Marine-Minded Mermaid. But in doing my research, I understand that you've been very, very busy in that, as usual.
Yes. I'm actually on to my 8th publication this year. So I actually wrote 4 poetry books, and I also have 4 Mertrina branded books. Though what I've found, it's very interesting if you look at writing as a business rather than just a passion. So I know we can get into that a lot later. Because I did want to be a writer out of passion at first, and then I realized during the pandemic, for example, where work was hard to get, I tried to diversify and make the books a livelihood. And so there's a lot of lessons that I've learned about being a quote unquote Caribbean author, a quote unquote poet, as well as a children's book writer. So there's a lot of that we can delve into today as well.
That simple statement that you've just made there, it covers a whole lot. When you mention the different kinds of books, sure, we want to inquire about the different genres that you've been involved in. But also you mentioned a number of different tasks because if it's one thing that we've learned here on TLC is that authors are never just authors. Authors are persons involved in marketing, persons are involved in sales. Authors are creatives because they have to find, believe it or not, creative ways to promote their work. And I believe that you have been wearing several of those hats. um,
Yes, definitely. I think authors are their own kind of entrepreneurs. I guess you can coin it that.
I
Because
like
again,
that. I
it's
like
just like
that. Yeah.
you're like a department in a business place. You're thinking of you have a whole department for marketing, a whole department for artwork, a whole department for writing, but that's just one person.
And believe it or not, yeah, it's just one person, so it's many hats authors wear.
Yeah, definitely.
In terms of writing, are you a full-time writer? Well, let me don't even ask that question. I'm not going to ask if you're a full-time writer because you are involved in several activities. But the question I should be asking is, well, actually, you know what? You also answered that question already because I was going to ask, how did you start off writing? And you went on to talk about how it is that, it was a passion and now you decided to try and focus on it as
Yes.
it being more of a business. Well, so as I ask those questions, let me ask another one. You've mentioned that you've written that you onto 8 publications so far.
Hmm.
In doing research, obviously, Metrina the Marine-Minded Mermaid is one. I've come across Drowsy Dwellings. I've come across
Yes.
Small Island Scenes. I've also come across Teen E Trini's thoughts.
Yes, teeny Trini's thoughts. So
No,
it's very interesting. Yeah, the way that it evolved really was that when I was a child, I was very much imaginative. So I have thousands and thousands of pages of like short stories that I used to just scribble down. A lot of them were very fantastic. So, either people with superhuman abilities or vampires or mermaids. And as I got older, I kind of wanted to focus on my academic background, which would be mostly sciences, because I was always attracted to the ocean and environment. So
mm-hmm.
as I got older and I focused on this academia, I kind of lost touch with the amazing imagination I had as a child. But there's something that grounds you within your childhood. Like it's something that you'll always possess throughout your life, is the things that you loved in childhood. They kind of give you this peace. It's a comfort when you get older and the world gets more complicated. So I started going back towards the mermaids and the local folklore, and I started writing short stories again. And it's funny because Metrina's first book is not a story. It's actually a complete breakdown of my university level uh syllabus for
No,
marine
no,
biology.
no,
So
I have to interject there, Katrina.
yes.
No, because to be honest, when I read the book, I was of two mindsets. I was thinking to myself, it's either A, this is a book for children that breaks down, the topic into digestible chunks so that they can understand it, or
Mhm.
or it's a book for adults that breaks down the complex topic in a form that they can understand as well. So I'm wondering if this book is for children or if this book is for
Thank
adults.
you. Thank you for that. So it's very interesting because I did actually write it for a younger version of myself because I was so analytical and scientific. And I actually really liked, which is so weird, I really liked reading textbooks. So as a child, I never really found a book that was satisfying just that aspect of the science based information, but in a nice, easy way to understand. So
Mhm.
that's where it kind of came in. And yes, it is true. A lot of adults are finding it more useful than the children because the children somehow they know exactly what it is already because we know now they have access. Whereas when we were younger, we only had like the encyclopedias and the internet was just coming about. But children now are so wrapped up in finding out new pieces of information. So I know that they need a little bit more than just the basics. So that's where the idea really came from. It's not a textbook, it's
Mhm.
a fun book. It's a fun textbook, I guess.
No,
So
I
that's where it really came about. And yes, the adults that read it to their kids are like, wow, this is amazing. And I never knew this. And I really tried my best to create a foundation for, well, it's called now ocean literacy. So my background is in marine biology, and I have been advocating for the environment and the ocean for 15 years as a youth advocate. So it kind of brought me into that thing that if we don't know something about something, why would we care about it? And why would we care about protecting it? So that's where ocean literacy now is where Metrina kind of lies. It's not an official category or anything like that. But I hope that it will help within that little niche of people who realize that the ocean is more important than we give it credit for.
No, well said, well said. So far, I mean, I'm liking what it is that you're bringing to the table. I like the idea of ocean literacy. I mean, it's sometimes the best way I could describe it is that you're walking around a corner and you're surprised by what it is that you see. And that's how I feel when I hear about ocean literacy. I didn't see it coming, but I'm delighted. I'm delighted when I do see it. It's like this new friend that you make, and it's just so new and interesting that you'd find yourself just wanting to find everything that you can about it. And I think even with your promotions as well, that kind of adds to the hype, your mermaid undertakings and exploits, the local mermaid. Can you tell us
Yeah.
how that you decide how it is you came across the idea?
So when I was about maybe 5 or 6, I had a dream that my mom sewed me a mermaid tail, and I swam out to sea, and she was like, "No, she's going away." So I swam back and I took off the tail. And then now it's very interesting because this is a whole movement in the external world. So in the US, there's actually mermaiding, where there are people who make something called a monofin. So it's created like flippers, just like if you're doing diving and what we call free diving.
Mm-hmm.
So it basically puts your feet into one big flipper that is the shape of a fin, a dorsal fin. Sorry, not dorsal. What am I talking about? The fin at the end, right? Your tail fin. And it propels you through the water. If you think of how a dolphin swims in professional swimming, we call it a dolphin kick. So you're basically tied to the legs together and you're swimming through the water as if you are a dolphin. And so, actually, as a child, and I'm talking about really young, like 4 or 5, I've been practicing my dolphin kick. When I wanted to be a mermaid, I didn't think that it would have actually happened where I could put on a tail looking thing over this monofin
Mm-hmm.
and transform myself basically into a human mermaid. And I saw it online. Of course, everything starts off on Amazon. And there were tails available for a little expensive. They were like about maybe 40 or 50 US at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And my dear husband, Ronald, who supports me in all the craziness that I do, he actually got me my first tail when we got married. And so I
Oh.
started training. So it's been how many years? 7 years that I've been training as a mermaid. And I only put the tail on in public in 2021 or 2022, I think it was. So it's not that long that I've been doing this in the public eye. Even though like my footprint has been, as soon as I came out on the scene, everybody was like, "Oh my God, there's a mermaid." And I'm not the first, believe it or not. There's actually a mermaid, Caribana. If you Google her, she was actually a little girl, and we talked so much about maybe 13 years ago. Was it a bit, maybe a little less? And she actually was the first person in Trinidad to bring these mermaid tales to the public. So you could have rented her tales,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and she had like mermaid merchandise, and she actually did it more as a mermaid based business.
Ah.
Whereas when I started, it was more about the ocean literacy with the little magic of a mermaid thrown in. Because who is not, who's going to forget that a mermaid told them to protect the ocean? You know,
I
it's
see
like
what
a
you did.
mermaid character personifies that ocean for us. So that was my slant on it.
No, that, and as usual, I have to admit, I mean, you're one of the more creative authors who I've come across because your method of promotion, it is very distinct. And again, like you said, it is very creative and it leaves a lasting impression. I mean, like you said, who is going to forget a mermaid telling them something?
Yes, I really hope so.
No, I mean, let's talk a little bit about your process for getting the books published. Did you get your books
Hmm.
self-published or did you go the route of a traditional publisher?
Yes, because it's funny when you're a writer, or at least you like to write, you don't label yourself a writer or an author yet because you haven't published anything. So if you imagine sitting there thinking, I want to be an author, there's nowhere that you can just go up on Google and say, I want to be an author, and this is a straightforward method on how to get your book published.
Mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm,
through a lot of research, because of course I had literally zero budget and just time,
mm-hmm,
I kind of weighed the options. I got a few calls and I called a couple companies. I had no writing agent. I was a sole new writer on the scene without a manuscript per se, with a genre that may not sell. Because educational children's books are not something that is the greatest market sale, right?
mm-hmm,
So, and then there's something called, there's the traditional publishers, then there's assisted self-publishing, and then there's purely self-publishing.
The way
And
that you
when
broke
I
that,
reviewed, yeah,
sorry to
that,
cut you across it, just the way that you broke that down there, I am certain that you have done extensive research into each of these
oh
options.
yes. It actually took maybe 3 years before my first book was completely self-published, and I
Wow.
decided to do the self-publication route. So I
Three.
can actually give a little bit of an insight into that now, because I know a lot of people who are wanting to be authors and write. So basically, a traditional publisher is where a person will have a writing agent or a literary agent.
Mm-hmm.
And these publication firms pay you to be their writer, right? They would pay you ahead of time most of the times for your
Mm-hmm.
next 3 manuscripts, and you sign a contract, and they pay you upfront so that you will have the resources that you need to finish these manuscripts within a certain time frame. And then you have editors at your disposal, and there's no money coming out of your pocket, but that usually comes when you have a great deal of writing experience. You've gone through all the competitions, all the processes. You've done, literary festivals, and you're in it, and you have a name, because, of course, remember, they're seeing it as a business. You are one of their assets if they sign you onto their company.
Ah.
So that is very difficult to get to. From my experience, of course, I know that there are differences out there, but this is like just the basic breakdown from what I understand.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's assisted self-publishing, which is a company that will help you to self-publish your book. Maybe they will take 10% of your royalties after every sale. Maybe they take a fee up front to help you with the advertising, with the editing, with the artwork for your cover pages. You have to think of this book as like it is multiple pieces of a puzzle that is not just pieces that are visible. You have invisible pieces as well. I
Hmm.
don't know if that makes sense, but basically, you have to look at a physical book being
Yeah.
broken down into many, many different parts. You have your cover artwork, your cover text, then your forward message. Who are you going to mention inside? You have your copyright page. I may not be using the correct terminology, but basically things that you need to make sure your book is actually published. It's actually out there with that thumbprint, how every human has a very unique thumbprint or an identification.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Each book has to have an ISBN number, which means that it's registered as an actual publication. And then if it does have an ISBN, if you want it in a bookstore, physical brick and mortar bookstore, it has to have a barcode because they have to put it into their systems. So all these things are things I learned within that first year of trying to figure out, how am I going to become a published author? And nobody has that roadmap laid out. I mean, now I do.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I do actually assist other authors self-publish, because I found that that was the best way, because the last option is complete self-publishing. And I do it through Amazon,
Ah.
because Amazon has a facility. Even if you're in the Caribbean, you get to publish your book for basically free. You
Oh.
get your free ISBN, you get your free barcode. All you have to do is have the correct format of your artwork and manuscript, and you can have a Kindle and a paperback book. And from the author profile, you can actually bring down and import your printed books from Amazon at a fraction of the cost of what you'll be selling them for on Amazon. Because remember, Amazon is a marketplace. So if it is that, for example, I'm just using arbitrary numbers, if it is that I'm selling my book for 20 US on Amazon, I'm
Hmm.
only retaining $1 on that 20 US, because Amazon is handling the editing and all that stuff to get it out there first, right? And they give you the ISBN and the barcode and everything. They're putting that book together and printing it for you and putting it up on their website. So you are paying Amazon to be your, I guess, your storefront, you know? And so by the time that book is sold, you only get a very, very small amount of the total of that sale. So that is the trade-off with being a self-published author. And from that as well, like I said, you have to order down your physical copies with the Amazon barcodes and ISBN and stuff like that. And then you have to peddle it to the bookstores locally, right? You have to write what we have consignment agreements, because no bookstore is going to pay you for 10 copies of your book if your book doesn't sell. So what you do is you cover the cost of the printing and bringing down of that book. You put it into a bookstore under consignment, and only when the books are sold, they give you a small percentage of that sale. So it's a similar process. The actual publisher does not retain more than I can't even say like 10% of the actual sale of the book.
Wow.
So it is a lot of math that you have to think about and marketing strategies that you have to think about to make it worth your while. Because if you sell one book a month, you're making $10, and that's not going to even buy like 2 doubles in Trinidad.
Wow. I mean, the way I mean, it sounds a lot more complicated, when it is that you give us that level of information. Do you think if it is that you were privy to what this process entailed, would you have followed through with the process, or would you have just decided to just, not do it?
I would have still done it because I had I had the drive to make the information available, and I knew that it would build more than just the brand of me as an author and a writer. It would also use my other skill sets and credibility because, like you said, I wear a lot of different hats. So internationally, I work a lot with climate advocacy and ocean literacy. So it was more about sharing that information and making it accessible to people all over the world, because it's not just about Caribbean information in the book. It's a general book for any child, any person rather, anywhere in the world could pick up that book. Of course, who could read English? Because I'm still not at the point where I could translate any of it. It's very expensive. I was so shocked the first quote I got to translate my book to Spanish.
Oh.
It's a lot more than you would think. And of course, I very much respect the profession. And you have to remember that people's skill sets are worth paying for. Like, for example, an artist, right? Locally, an artist could charge you anywhere from 2,000 to 4,000 TT dollars to do a digital drawing that is the correct size and pixels for a Kindle book cover. If that I hope that made sense. But yeah, I mean, you have to value people's skills, and that is why this is such a competitive business, because as a writer, you just want to write, but that is not the only thing that you have to do to have a book.
I,
So yeah.
I I mean, Katrina, I like having these conversations with you because when you make statements like these, it opens up the opportunity for different kinds of conversations. I mean, first off, you mentioned, the different jobs, of course, that an author would have while undertaking the process of getting their book published. And
Yes.
you also indicated that the cost of having your book translated, because having it translated, as much as it is costly, you have to respect the skill set of the persons who do these things, artists,
Mm-hmm.
translators, etc. The reason all this I'm saying is leading up to my next question.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about AI? Because AI is a big thing now, and I actually went to a conference, and AI is becoming very active in the publishing aspects of books, whether it
Yes,
be generating content or whether it be creating artwork. And I mean, dare I even say, maybe even assisting in translating.
it is.
What are your thoughts on AI in the process of publishing a book from what you've seen?
Right. Well, that is a fantastic question because Amazon right now, actually, before it was much simpler, I think, but they've added on a section now where you have to say if your book content contains anything generated by AI.
Oh,
And it's an ethical thing, because if I took 4 years to write my book from scratch, right? but I can type in a prompt on one of the AI generators and say the same thing. I want 42 pages of a child-friendly um, marine biology syllabus. And then you just copy and paste that into a format, and voila, you have a book. I mean, it took me 3 years where it would take another person 3 minutes because they're using those AI tools. And so personally, it is a bit of a gray area for me still. I don't use it. I can say that I don't use it because I still want to have that organic relationship with my books. But I can see the allure of wanting to have multiple books generated quickly so that you don't know what is going to be successful, right? So, for example, my book has sold maybe 100 copies. I spent 5 years on the book. I spent 3 years marketing the book. I have it on 6 different marketplaces or whatever, 10 local bookstores. But if you have an AI generated book that you generated in 3 minutes, you could cut down the time on that by so much and you can focus on the actual marketing and get the money faster. So it depends on your ethical persuasion and how you feel about your books. If it is that you're just doing it for the cash money and you want to just market it as a business, that you're creating a product and you don't care about how the product was created, and you're just interested in productivity rather than passion, I would say that that is where my questions lie. And personally, I don't use AI for anything that I do creatively. It is a great tool, but I think you can never beat the eye of an artist. When it comes to something like, well, even a writer putting words together in a string that makes your heart melt, that is something that a true wordsmith can do. And it kind of takes it away when AI gets involved, I think.
During the course of our conversation, you mentioned that you had done 8 books, eight books. Do
Yes.
you mind telling us a little bit about any of those books? It can be one or it can be 8 if it is that you so choose.
Sure. So, like I was talking about before, a lot of like passion goes into these books. So, the Metrina quadrat, I guess I could call them a quartet. I don't know how to call them yet. It might turn into 5 if I feel so inclined in the future. But basically, Metrina, as she currently is formed, was based off of the science behind the ocean and how people can protect it and in turn then protect themselves. So those science-based books are for different age ranges. So for example, the Metrina ABCs can be for any age. They're from baby all the way up because the baby is going to see a large number and learn the alphabet. But an adult can then see a name of an organism that begins with that letter and then go off to find more information about it if they're so inclined. So it's not like J is for jellyfish alone. You're gonna get J is for jetty or jet ski or something like that as well. So I tried to make that one very useful for both the adult reading to the child and the child. Then you have the Mini Marine Biologist storybook, which is for ages 1 to 10. And it's not so much a story as a poem that brings you through those same concepts of marine biology, which is the foundation, which is water, going into the science behind the ocean, but in a very, very simple form that any age can understand. And of course, rhyming, I think humans are just natural poets, like I think we have this affinity for rhyming words, like it just sticks in your mind. So it's a great way for kids to remember, and then the adult as well doesn't get too tied up with too many of the big words. It's very simple and it's a good foundation point. Then I have the Mini Marine Biologist Guidebook, which is for 10 and up. And that one is very much a very simplified textbook on marine biology. very simple words, and it guides you through the concepts of basic marine biology. And then I have the Mini Marine Biologist activity book, which brings together everything in some very fun and unique ways. So, like, for example, I have recipes, so you can learn how to make sustainable sushi. And then you have your normal things like the word searches and stuff like that. So, it's something that I loved because I was always a very practical child. I loved doing things in like experiment mode. So it was more for that kind of child instead of like just rote learning, you get to actually experience it and then learn a concept from the experience. So those are the four Metrina books as they currently are. And then I have my poetry books, and each one has its own flavor. So, like you said, drowsy dwellings, literally meaning whatever popped into my head before I went to sleep. And I had a little notebook that I used to write in. So, a lot of those poems were written between the ages of probably 18 to now, I'm in my 30s. Then Teeny Trini's thoughts were all poems written while I was living abroad. I was very fortunate. My dad had a job in China, and so we lived there for a short time. And while I was there, I used to be dreaming of Trinidad.
Oh,
And so
homesick.
those books, yeah, that is actually one of my biggest books yet to date. So all those poems were written between the ages of 13 and 18. I found all of my notebooks and translated them into that book. It's very cringy, so I would allow, like, I would say it's not for adults really. It's for more teenagers who are going through that teenage angst, because it doesn't actually say anything much about anything much. It's just kind of emotional and angsty.
Okay, okay.
And then I have two poetry books. One is coming out this month. And well, you'll have to see that one. It's about ocean poetry specifically.
Ocean
And
literature
then
again. Yeah.
yes. So this one is only ocean poetry. And so, like, for example, you'll find one on mangroves, you'll find one on sand. So just my thoughts about different aspects of the ocean. And then the small island scenes was basically an ode to my love of the Caribbean islands. uh, I tried my best to make it flavorful from every, culture within our very broad melting pot that we have in this region. So it's mostly for the diaspora, like people who probably were born here or grew up here and then left and miss home. It's kind of like that feeling that I had when I was missing Trinidad. I wanted the people who also are missing home in the Caribbean to read those little thoughts about the Caribbean and feel a little less homesick, or maybe more homesick and come home to visit. And as for the things that I want to do, I think I've done a lot with the ocean literacy in terms of like, I've cast a very broad net. And I don't think that I'll be doing another poetry book, because poetry, again, is hard to sell. Those were basically passion projects. And I've been publishing 2 books a year for the past 4 years. So that's why I'm at 8. I do want to branch off into storytelling, because a lot of the feedback is that children prefer the anecdotes and they prefer that imaginative, whimsical kind of writing to what I've been presenting so far. So I've been sitting on quite a few things because I was waiting for an opportunity with an international publication company. But I feel like if I'm going to still take control and do the self-publishing and market it myself through all of the different mechanisms that I've learned about. So it's a story, and of course it has the same ethical basis of, you have to protect the environment, and young people have the power and the voice to do anything they want to. So it's the same thing, and yes, it is going to involve a mermaid.
Of course, of
Yes,
course, of course.
of course. And I'm also working on a young adult series and an adult novel. But those may be another 5 to 10 years in the making. I don't think I have the capacity to rush those. I want to make sure that they are as good as I can make them on my own. And probably I'm gonna have to hire some people to read them for me, or if some kind people would like to read them for free and give me feedback. check me in 2030.
I mean, that isn't far-fetched, but I mean, because I think there are some groups of persons who actually do that. So yeah, yeah, that's very possible. But as for the projects, I mean, we look forward to them as with all your other offerings. I mean, ocean literature has been very interesting so far. And in terms of your offerings for young adults and adult novels are concerned, well, I mean, we're avidly looking to see what it is that you bring to the table.
Thank
Uh,
you.
well, that pretty much brings us to the end of the interview at this time. Ms. Khan Roberts, thank you very much for entertaining us and agreeing to be interviewed by Tropical Literature Creators.
And thank you so much to Tropical Literature Creatives for giving us a platform by which we can reach out to our potential audiences as well as our community of authors. Because as I've learned in the past 4 years, you are nothing but a community based animal. If we don't have that community and we're not willing to work together as Caribbean people writing about our experiences in such a unique part of the world is going to continue to not see how much we have to offer here. So I'm grateful to you for giving us this platform as well. Thank you.
Okay, well, that's really encouraging to hear, Ms. Roberts. You've been listening to TLC, Tropical Literature Creators. If you've heard something of interest or something you like, reach out to us. Reach out to our authors. Follow us on social media. We look forward to hearing from you.